Welcome into another wonderful episode of Gridiron Eve. He's Mike Huseman. I'm John Vogel. Mike, how are we doing this week? We feeling okay still?
I
We
mean,
breathing okay?
we are feeling okay. I love my new job. The fall's rolling along well. I'm enjoying watching football. Now, my status in GE is not going well, especially after last week. It was a bad week. And I feel yeah, it was a solid win. Yes, it was three of them, in fact. Um, I'm almost, and it hit me this week. Like I'm kind of in the position that you were in last November, where now you can kind of hit it down the fairway and probably be good. I have to start making plays, which is tough because you can't get many wrong, or else it's just going to snowball.
And you got
But
2 weeks to do it. That's the
yeah,
other tough part. I think I had like a whole month when I fell behind.
yeah. But
So,
all three of our challenges were SEC games last week that you got me on. Auburn, Arkansas was one you were on Auburn. Mizzou, Tennessee, you were on Mizzou, and then Ole Miss, Georgia. The Mizzou one surprised me the most. Like all of them were, well, none of the games were competitive, really. But I was the most surprised by the Mizzou, and I don't know why. A lot of people were probably, more surprised by the Auburn one.
no,
But
I don't think
yeah,
anybody was expecting Missouri to come out there and win by 29.
yeah,
And obviously, Drink had to go ahead and rub it in a little bit from last year, running up the score just like Tennessee did last year, kicking the field goal, icing the Tennessee kicker with 36 seconds to go.
I actually so I turned it off. Like I had a few games going. I didn't see that. But I did, heard about it after. But I wasn't watching when that happened.
Yeah,
When I
he
saw
iced the kicker.
the really quick handshake at the end.
Yeah, no, he iced him, and it was
Yeah,
intentional. It was because they run the score up last year, so he's like, "Hey, we're coming in here very strong this time."
yeah.
And Drink went ahead and declared himself champions of Tennessee because they took down Vanderbilt too. So
I guess Drink could also say he's the South Carolina champions because going back to his year at Appalachian State and his four at Mizzou, he's 5-0 against Gamecocks.
fantastic.
So yeah.
Well, let's talk about this week a little bit, man, because it's been a week. Last week was nuts. What was the thing outside of Mizzou that surprised you the most?
Um, I guess not challenge related, but um that Washington, like not that I'm not surprised they won, but they keep puttering along, they keep winning games, and like some of their metrics, like their second order wins and those advanced things that the committee uses, Washington's not looking good in. But in the end,
Mhm.
maybe they won't have to. I mean, if they finish as an undefeated conference champ, they got a really good chance to make the playoffs. So
Yeah.
they're doing their business now. Um, Another game that surprised me, like I didn't know it would be as competitive as it was, that UNC Duke game that went to overtime. That was a really fun game. Caught the fourth quarter in OT in that game. Tar Heels, of course, held on. Um, Sam Houston State getting their second win of the year against La Tech. They'd started so poorly,
Yep.
but we're in a lot of low scoring, close games. And then Boise State wins by a ton, then fires Avalos, and we finally have had some coaching movement. Obviously Jimbo got let go, Zach Arnett let go, Avalos got let go at Boise. Um, Braun today at Northwestern, the interim tag was taken off of him, so he was given the permanent job there.
Okay.
And Brady Hoke is retiring at the end of the year, so San Diego State will have an opening. As it looks like UCLA will as well, though that technically hasn't been confirmed. It's out there.
Yeah, no, that
Yeah,
was said that Kelly was probably going to go after the USC game. Sounds like that may or may not be pending result.
yeah,
That may or they may not. The result there may not matter.
yeah.
Um, Now it was funny because when Fisher went, I don't think I said anything publicly. I told a friend of mine that Arnett would be right behind him, and the very next day Arnett is fired as well.
Yeah,
Those interim coaches named Elijah Johnson at Texas A&M
yeah.
and Greg Knox at Mississippi State. Uh,
who's
The
been the
Art,
interim there before.
I know it's
Yeah.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
Now the Arnett hire just didn't make a lot of sense
No.
from a schematic standpoint. It made sense in the grand scheme of things because you wanted to have some continuity after the tragic death of
Yeah.
Mike Leach, and the surprising death, if I may add. Nobody really
No.
anticipated or saw that coming. And so you didn't want to go out and go get a new guy and mess up, I guess, everything that he had running. You wanted someone who'd been in the program that the players were familiar with to help, rebound. But Arnett is beyond underperformed at Mississippi State. In this season, it's been some really atrocious games that have been played. And if I might add, I think Sam Pittman is going to be on the way out too. As much as I hate to say that.
I thought that too. Like, and I still think it might happen. I was on Locked On Ole Miss last night to talk about the coaching carousel with those guys. One of their guests knows a lot of Arkansas stuff. He thinks Pittman will probably get one more year. I'm not so sure. So I'll be curious what happens there.
Well, it's hard to justify keeping his job at this point because
that's exactly what he said. Yeah.
The loss to BYU at the beginning of the year, we thought that maybe BYU's better than we thought they were. No, they're not. That's atrocious. Yeah. Losing to Texas A&M in the fashion that they did, that should have been a rebound game. Should have been able to come back stronger, especially after last year. They did not. No. And then losing to Mississippi State in a 10-point game, you got a field goal out of it. You lost because they got a touchdown.
Yeah.
That's just almost impermissible. Then you go out there and get blown up by Auburn.
Yeah. And the Mississippi State one, I think with that job, like the continuity part made sense. What never made sense to me was giving him the permanent job. They could have named him interim for 1 year and nobody would have batted an eye. No other school was coming to get him. Like, they could have said, you're going to be the interim until the end of the season, and then made that decision instead of getting locked into a long-term deal where now they got to pay him a buyout. It's about $4.5 million, not as significant as some, but still, it was something they didn't need to do.
So at what point do you think schools are going to take the approach that you see a lot of teams, do in the NFL with their players and say, we're not going to guarantee you all this money? Now, at what point does that start to play into coaching contracts in college football?
I see that being a ways off because most of the FBS coaches are represented by a small select group of agents. That's going to be a non-starter for those agents. They are not going to enter into deals where that money's not guaranteed because it's bad for their clients. So right. I think it will take a big shift. What could start that trend would be more money up front. So instead of giving me, $80 million over 10 years, we'll only sign a 2-year deal, but you're going to pay me $35 million for those 2 years.
Yeah.
I think it's a negotiation where you're paying more in the short term for less length on the contract.
And I think that's going to come at some point because you look at some of these buyouts that we've just seen this week. Jimbo Fisher, $76 million. Yeah. Mississippi State, you mentioned, has a really good buyout. It's not as bad as some. And then you got these schools like Michigan State at the beginning of the year finding a with cause to get out of the buyout that would have been upwards of $80 million.
Yeah.
I think at some point you have to sit there and go, this is not working. These long-term deals aren't working because very rarely does the coach make it that long if they don't get hired away somewhere or they don't just get fired for bad performance. And you're gonna have to make some. You can't keep making the same mistake over and over again if you're one of these schools. The boosters are already having to pay right now, and that's a whole nother part of a discussion we can get into at some point. Whose boosters don't want to pay a lot of money in NIL right now. They don't want to be paying even more money to buy a coach out and then go get another one.
I think one thing too that could be a variable in that less long-term buyout money would be if you hire younger first-time coaches. Those guys will be more apt to take the chance and not require the long-term investment just because they want the job. Now, when those guys get successful, they're going to want that, which is reasonable. If you earn that, good. Like Jimbo, good for you. If they were willing to pay you that, I applaud you. I mean, that's generational wealth, and you're set for your grandkids are set for the rest of their lives. So it's one of those things I think we're a ways away from happening, but there are ways where it could happen.
Right. Well, you ready to get into some stuff here, Ben, with our picks and everything?
Ready when you are. Yeah.
So we're both kind of blind here. I was late at practice today. So starting with our first round, you like Colorado at plus 4.5 over Washington State. Yep. You ain't hard to find.
These two teams have won one of their last 10 games combined. They are both doing atrocious lately. By the way, this is a Friday night. I put this game first because it's a Friday night game.
Gotcha.
But Colorado's one of those teams, we're looking at them. We expected they'd win 3 games coming into the year or so. They're 4-6 right now. They've been competitive in a lot of their recent games, though. Arizona, Oregon State are salty teams. They lost to both of those teams by 1 score.
Yep.
UCLA was a 2-score game. That was a bad matchup for them. They had the bad loss to Stanford in double OT where they really blew it. And Washington State started 4-0 and has not won since. And they've also lost to some bad. I mean, they've lost to Cal, Stanford, Arizona State. None of those 3 teams are that great.
Stanford.
And both these teams lost to Stanford. But Stanford's Wazoo is allowing a lot of points. And Colorado's throwing the ball extremely well. Shadur Sanders in that offense is going to throw the ball a ton. They're going to put up points. I don't know if either of these teams are going to play any defense. But I do think Colorado is scrappy enough and goes into this game Friday night and they cover this, whether they lose by 3 or get a narrow win. I like Colorado just because the makeup of that team to me looks better right now. Wazoo has really good receivers. Cam Ward has been very up and down. I go back and forth between he looks great to he's terrible, which has kind of been his time there. I think Jake Dickert's a good coach too, but just looking at some of these stats, largely Colorado is throwing the ball well. They've thrown a ton of, I believe 26 touchdowns, I want to say, is what Shadur is thrown for. They're also pretty good at forcing interceptions. And that could be an area where they flip the field. And if Cam Ward makes some bad plays, I like the Buffaloes in this one.
Well, the one thing that's interesting is when you look at these two teams in 1-score games. Wazoo's only won 1 game. I mean, one game in a 1-possession game.
Yeah.
So that was to Oregon State beginning of the year, 38-35. Wonderful shootout, a lot of fun to watch.
And in hindsight, a great win too for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really thought they were legit after that game.
Absolutely.
But these rest of these 1-score games that you start looking at, they had a 1-score game to UCLA, they lost. They had a 1-score game to Stanford, they lost. They had a 1-score game to Cal, they lost. Whereas when you look at Colorado, they're a little bit better in these 1-score games because they beat TCU by a score. That was 3-point victory. Double overtime with Colorado State, they won. Arizona State won by a field goal. Stanford was a 1-score game. They lost in double overtime that time, but 1-score game. So over the consistency of the season, Colorado's been able to keep a lot of games at 1 score. USC, granted, backdoor type cover. Their crazy comeback had a chance at that.
Yeah.
Didn't come up with it. As I mentioned, Stanford, Oregon State, Arizona. These are all 1-score games. So when Wazoo's losing, it's typically by more than 1 score. When you look at a 4.5-point cover, you definitely have to, that it's going to be tight. It's going to be, we're talking about another 1-score game, and Colorado's been
tight. Yeah, I do think this will be a tight one.
Colorado's been a whole lot more consistent. making these one-score games work. So for that reason, I have to go ahead and agree with you. I think Colorado's going to cover 4.5. I think they might win outright. I don't think straight up is a bad bet here at all. I really don't.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
On my side, I'm going with the game that's kicking off here in 40 minutes. You can catch it on ESPN. Maction, baby. Maction.
Yeah.
And this is where I struggled last year. And maybe I kind of felt bad for you, Hughes. I had to give you a shot here, see if you wanted to take it.
This game was my last cut. So I almost picked Miami, Ohio. So I love this pick. Yeah. Not touching this one. I had 9 or 10 games. Yeah, I had 9 or 10 games. And out of the 5 that I cut, 2 of them are your picks. So this is one of them. Yeah.
Miami, Ohio, -7.5 over Buffalo tonight. Miami, Ohio has been kind of a surprise team in the MAC. They've lost 2 games this year. One to Miami, Florida, the other to Toledo. Yeah. Toledo's the best team in the MAC by far, not even close. So when you look at their body of work that they've done this year, they've been very dominant. Not a lot of one-score games here. We're talking Kent State 23-3, Bowling Green 27-0, Western Michigan 34-21. They played Buffalo every year since 1999. Miami's 15-9. Home team has won 6 straight against the spread and straight up. So they're at home tonight against Buffalo. I like my odds here. I like them to cover 7.5. Buffalo, on the other hand, we didn't know a lot about them coming in, especially when they started 0-4, had some really close losses, played pretty well against Wisconsin, tight one against Louisiana, but really struggled once they got into conference play. There's only one game that they've really been able to pull away in, and that was Kent State a few weeks ago. Lost the last 2 to Toledo and Ohio. Miami's up there on that level. These weren't close games. I really like Miami to cover double digits.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. The one thing that made me pull away from this was Gabbert's hurt and not going to play, so Miami may be a really, really run-heavy team, which is always tough to cover multiple possessions. But I'm not touching this one. That Buffalo team's a shambles. I couldn't believe you'd mentioned Toledo being the best team in that conference. They are, by far. I couldn't believe they came back and won last night. Bowling Green was throttling them at halftime.
Yeah, that was a fun game.
Yeah, it was.
That was a fun game.
That was the one I watched. I didn't see a lick of the other MAC games, but I watched that one, and it was a good one. So I'm with you on this one. Yeah.
So no challenge. All right. On to round 2. You like North Carolina to cover 6.5 over Clemson.
Yeah. In Drake May's time, he's played Clemson once. It's the only game in his career where he's lost by more than one possession, oddly enough. I think he comes out very motivated for this game, and this will be one of the games scouts will be looking at for him, playing against a defense with multiple NFL players on it, even if Clemson is a little down. And for UNC, this is a big game too. I mean, they got a nice win last week, but, lagging behind a little with Louisville, but they're still in the picture to go to the conference title game and play Florida State. If Louisville stumbles, they could do that. And I don't think that will be lost on them. Now, UNC's defense is troublesome, to say the least. They're not very good. They haven't been good for a few years. They had the 2 god-awful wins against Virginia and Georgia Tech. Then they beat Campbell, the FCS team, and beat Duke last week. They can do some things all right, though, and taking away explosive plays is one of those. And I'm hoping, and I guess in this case, picking them to be able to stop the run just enough to allow Drake May to have a really good game. And I'm putting a lot of the onus on him to find Tez Walker and have them go off. And I like the Tar Heels in this one.
I got 2 points. First off, that the Tar Heels are 3-6 against the spread since 2002 against Clemson. 1-8 straight up, by the way, on that too.
I feel like you've said the Clemson. Sorry to cut you out there. You've talked about Clemson's spread a few times this year. I feel like they've been very good against the spread under Dabo. It seems like all of their ATS records are really good.
Yes, Absolutely. And favorite is 14-1 straight up and 11-4 against the spread since 1996.
Okay.
If you go back to 2003, that's it's 5-1 straight up and against the spread. The favorite is in this series. Yeah, obviously this is a team they don't see each other a whole lot.
Yeah.
With the way that the conference schedule has been built out in the last decade or so. North Carolina got beat last year. This is a very different team at this point, though. Cade Klubnik just coming up. A lot of really good players. They win the Clemson wins the ACC title. Now, the one thing about Clemson is they might have 4 losses this year, but the last few games, things have really started to click.
Yep.
31-23, they take down Notre Dame. That was a really surprise upset last week. They took care of Georgia Tech, 42-21.
And in their last loss, they didn't look bad against it. That's the best game I've seen NC State play all year.
Yeah.
That was 2 pretty salty teams there.
It seems like they came out of the bye week with some more focus, better intention, better execution. Last week was the best we'd seen them,
which speaks to good coaching. If you're coming out your bye week good,
right. And the other thing too is there's an old tale that goes, an old saying in football that goes, first year starters, freshman, sophomore. For each one that you have to start, you're going to lose a game.
Yeah.
You know how many first year starters they have playing this year?
I bet it's not many.
It's 4.
Yeah, I can't. How many?
4.
4. Okay.
So if I'm going by the old wives' tale,
more than I would have thought. Yeah.
If I'm going by the old wives' tale, Clemson wins and covers.
Okay.
For that reason, I have to go ahead and challenge this one.
Okay.
I think that Clemson can take care of business. I think that they can win by a touchdown. I understand that Drake May's never lost by more than 1 possession except to Clemson in the ACC championship game last year as the starting quarterback there. Actually, there's 2 times. The other time was Notre Dame last year.
Okay.
32-45. They lost that game. They were also favored to win that game, by the way. But I like Clemson right now. I think Clemson's an ascending team going into the back end of the season. Yeah. North Carolina, like you mentioned, the defense has been really spotty. A couple of those games that they've won, they probably should have lost because of the way they just played. And I like Clemson to come in here and take care of business. At home. Death Valley.
Yep, it is in Clemson.
Going to go ahead and stay here in the ACC Who's because ACC's got some good matchups this week. We had a lot of last week. We had a ton of great SEC matchups. This week, the SEC goes into a lot of their, you call it their extra bye week. There's a lot of SEC against FCS opponents, not as competitive this week there. But when you look at, I went ahead and I like Louisville minus 1.5 over Miami of Florida. Louisville had a really tough game last week against Virginia on a Thursday night. Virginia came storming back into this game. I was watching it. I really enjoyed it. Thought it was a good game. Ended up being a lot better than I thought it was going to be. But outside of that game, when you look at since the bye week, they'd allowed 3 points in 2 games against Duke and Virginia Tech. Now, Duke did not have Riley Leonard, so that's an important thing to note. Virginia Tech has been Virginia Tech this year. But Virginia played with a lot of energy, a lot of passion. This team found a way to get it done. They have almost a mini bye week here, where they get a couple extra days to prep for this game over Miami of Florida. They're going down. They're going to be on the road. Yeah. Miami's home presence is not good. I don't know if you've ever watched a Miami game when they're playing at home.
In big games, it's pretty good, though. And I wonder if the fans will turn out for this one. They may not. But
it seems like the Orange Bowl is too far away for kids to really want to go out there.
Could be fair, yes.
The favorite has won 11 straight in this series too. So between Miami and Louisville. So I like Louisville. I think that Jeff Brom's got this team focused. They're in the right direction. They got into the top 10, if I remember correctly, into the playoff.
They are 10th, yes.
So they're top 10 in the playoff rankings now. And they have a legitimate chance to control the ACC championship. I think they're going to come in here and take care of business. I like basically a pick 'em at 1.5.
Miami's an interesting team. So Emory Williams got horrifically injured near the end of last week's game. Compound in his arm, bad deal. So Tyler Van Dyke is back in the saddle after getting benched.
Yep.
He promptly went in the game, led a good drive, and then threw an interception, which has kind of been his MO all year.
Yep.
But this Louisville team has not impressed me in a while. The Duke game they did, but like you said, Riley Leonard wasn't playing. They had started, well. Indiana, BC, they look good. But then NC State they beat by 3, which looks better now than it did at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Notre Dame game, they looked really good. I, for the life of me, don't understand how they lost to Pitt. That Pitt team's 2-8, and they're just god awful. And Pitt kind of took it to them. That was a 3-possession game. I don't know how it happened. They've gotten on track since then. Defense has played well. Granted, against 3 offenses that aren't great, though that Virginia offense is starting to show some signs of life. This Miami team is 6-4, coming off a loss to a good Florida State team where they played well. An NC State team who was just a lot better than Miami that night in a 14-point game. Miami's didn't do much. And then Miami had beaten Virginia and Clemson before that, both at home. Where this game is. So considering our GE leaderboard right now, I'm challenging this one. I have Miami. Yeah, so I'm going to challenge this one and go with the Canes, which it amounts to basically it's more or less a pick 'em, like you said. It is somewhat of a contrarian pick. Not a lot of people are on Miami. You see some, but at +1.5, I'm largely banking on my eye test on Louisville being right and that they're just not as good as their record is. So under a circumstance where we were tied or similar, may not do it, but here we are, and I'm going with the Canes.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I like it. And you do have a good point about how Louisville hasn't played as well here, but I think that defensive line has been enough of a problem here with, Ashton Gelati leading the charge. They played really well. The defense has stepped up. But we'll see. Miami back to Tyler Van Dyke. This can be fun.
And my biggest fear is that Van Dyke goes up and throws 3 or 4 picks. He's turned the ball over way too much this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remember 2 years ago when I said he wasn't a Heisman candidate, and I had all those people telling me I was an idiot.
Yes. I mean, there were people then, Heisman, top 5 NFL draft pick, people were saying, they were all
I never saw that. No. Never saw that. So we're going to go to round 3. You like Florida Atlantic to cover 9.5 over Tulane.
Yeah, this is a lot of points for me. I don't think FAU wins this outright, but at home, I like them. They're defensively, they're decent up front, and they are a team who is running the ball decently well. And they have LeJontay Wester, who leads the nation. He has 93 catches, leads FBS. And this Tulane team is not what they were last year. Record-wise, they've only lost the 1 game. They're still good. They're still one of the better G5 teams. But I think this is too many points for them to lay at home, especially against an FAU team who, passer rating wise, they're pretty good. Special team wise, they're really good in the return game, both punts and kicks. They're doing a great job getting good field position. And I just don't trust this Tulane team to beat them by 10 points or more on the road.
I think that's absolutely fair. And I've seen this Florida Atlantic team in person. I went down there and I saw them.
That was Middle Tennessee, wasn't it?
No, UAB.
UAB, okay.
I went down to Birmingham. Yep. Beautiful stadium, by the way.
Oh, okay.
If you ever get a chance to go to Birmingham and go to that stadium, I can't remember what the name of it is right now off the top. My Protective Stadium. That's what it is. That is a phenomenal building, phenomenal venue. Really easy to get to. You just get off of 65 and you're there. You drive a mile, you're back on 65. I mean, it's so easy to get to. It's not even funny.
That's one thing that was nice with Williams-Brice in Columbia for going to Gamecock games. Like, obviously, I live there, but right off of the freeway, really easy to get to.
Yeah, yeah, it was awesome. So, but I had a great time when I went there, and
Good.
I was really impressed with Wester, as you mentioned, the running back duo. I agree with you. I think that this team's not going to win this game. The the quarterback issue that they kind of have is right now they started with Casey Thompson, transfer from Texas through Nebraska. Now he's hurt, and they're back on to Daniel Richardson.
Yeah, former Central Michigan. Yeah.
Yep, transfer from Central Michigan. The one thing I noticed, being on the field watching him was he cannot see where he's throwing the ball. He is strictly a timing guy.
Okay.
And he will hit these guys knowing where they're going to be by just anticipating them being there. He can read the coverage pre-snap. As long as you don't mix anything up post-snap, he's going to find the open guy. He's really smart like that. But he can't see. He's 5'9".
Yeah.
It's like Kyler Murray back there, but not as electric.
Yeah.
And but the one thing, too, about Tulane is they haven't covered a game this year since they played UAB.
Wow. I wouldn't have thought that. Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't covered a game this year since UAB. All of their games have been tight. North Texas, homecoming, they won by 7. That was a double-digit favorite. Rice won by 2. They were favored by a touchdown. East Carolina won by 3, double-digit favorites. Tulsa last week, double-digit favorites, won by 2. So I have to agree with you. I think that Florida Atlantic is going to cover this. I'm not challenging that.
Okay.
When you look at I like MTSU at -7.5 over UTEP. This UTEP team's been awful this year, dude. I think we were really expecting.
Yeah, awful.
We thought UTEP was going to come out here and play really well. I think they were. Phil Steele projected them to finish second in the Conference USA. The problem, he was almost right. They're second to last in the Conference USA right now, behind Sam Houston. The only reason they're ahead of Sam Houston is because they have a head-to-head win over them. They've won 3 games this year, 3-7 on the season. Not a lot of competitive games either. New Mexico State blew them out 28-7. Louisiana Tech beat them on a Friday night. They haven't been particularly impressive this year, 24-10. UNLV, impressive team. They beat them pretty good. Northwestern handed it to them. This team's struggling against Jacksonville State week 1. The one thing that this goes back to even last year, this is a team that does not play well on the road.
Yeah.
They are bad on the road. Even last year, you look at their conference games, Louisiana Tech lost by 10 on the road. Rice lost by 7 on the road. UTSA lost by 3 on the road. All the other wins that they had last year were at home. This is a team that played much better at home. Having to go to MTSU, a team that they lost to last year, by double digits, I don't see them doing it. They've been destroyed when they've gone to MTSU and they've traveled to Murfreesboro. In the 2 matchups that they have this decade, I think that MTSU is rolling on all gears at this point of the season. Just handed it to FIU last week, 40-6.
Yep.
Played a good competitive game, showed they got some defense against New Mexico State, but they're starting to roll a little bit better. Again, another 3-win team, but much more explosive, much more talented than UTEP can prepare for.
Yes, so this was the second of your 5 games where I had also picked and then cut it. So I'm on middle as well. This UTEP team is way worse than we thought they would be. Dana Dimmel had inherited a bad team. His first 2 years, they weren't good. Then the last 2, they were decent. I thought they were going to have another 5 or 6 win season this year, and that's not going to happen. I know a decent amount of guys in that industry and guys who have coached with him. To a man, everybody says he's a really good coach. This year, they're just not doing it. And he may lose his job at the end of this year. I don't think it's a done deal, but I don't think it's a done deal that he keeps it either. He's looking at the hot seat potentially, and I'm on you with middle in this one. I like the Raiders to cover that.
Fair enough. Moving on to round 4, Texas Tech -3 over UCF. That's your pick.
Raiders are looking a lot better the last couple of weeks than they had been earlier. I remember they were a team early in the year, like preseason. I thought they'd be better. Then they started off really poor. They lost to Wyoming, lost to Oregon at home in a game they actually played really well in. Lost to West Virginia back when West Virginia was playing pretty well. Then they got a few wins. Lost to Kansas State, which K-State's legit.
Mm-hmm.
Lost to BYU on the road. BYU's not that good. But then they've beaten TCU. They went on the road and beat Kansas last week. And this UCF team, like all of the new teams that joined the Big 12, they were having a rough go of it in year one.
Yeah.
And Texas Tech, Morton is back healthy now, which is a big reason why I picked him. He's a good QB. Brooks is a good running back. Receiver-wise, they're spreading it. They have all kinds of guys that can catch the ball.
Yep.
And for UCF, Plumlee is good running the ball. He's not been as consistent throwing the ball. He's been hurt a lot. I mean, he has an 11-7 TD to interception ratio, which for a veteran I wasn't too impressed with. Harvey's a pretty good running back, but I like Texas Tech at home to win this one. They're a team that is trending upwards, and they're getting better as the season. They're playing their best football right now, and I like them to win this by 3 or more at home.
There's a couple things that concern me with it, and it's both teams kind of have what would you call it, like a euphoria effect this week.
Yeah,
or maybe the victory last week is something that is going to carry over into this week in almost in a fatigue type deal. That Kansas game was rough. They got the win, but they were playing a third string quarterback the entire game.
Yeah.
Now UCF, on the other hand, blew out Oklahoma State. That wasn't even a contest, and that's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
This team played both the Oklahomas really well. The last 2 games that UCF's played on the road, taken care of business against Cincinnati, won by 2, lost to Oklahoma by 2 on a failed 2-point conversion that would have tied it. While they haven't been good, they've been struggling. They've been very competitive, I think, in the conference overall. The conference losses that they all have: Kansas State, Baylor, Kansas, all good teams. West Virginia, Oklahoma. West Virginia is bowl eligible for the first time, right? In a long time.
West Virginia took it to them. That was the week after Oklahoma.
Yep.
And they,
and that was a euphoria. That was a fatigue type deal.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that while I'm hearing you about Texas Tech, and I do think they are playing a lot better, and there's some players down there. The other thing about Texas Tech is the players that are going to the Shrine Bowl officially accepted their invites today.
Nice. Good for them.
So there'll be, I think there's 3 of them that are going. A lot of coaches will keep those invites away from their players until the end of the year because of the distraction that it creates. It almost starts looking ahead. Okay. I wonder if that's going to be the case here. I'm actually going to challenge this.
Okay.
I think UCF could win this game outright. I think they have the ability to. And I'm not exactly – I think the UCF is trending upward higher than Texas Tech is right now.
Could be.
So
could be.
That's why I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to challenge you on this one.
Okay. Fair.
Now, me, on the other hand, for this round, I went ahead with a SEC pick, which I dominated last week. Not trying to brag or anything, but just...
No, you did. You did.
Reminding you who's daddy. In the SEC, that is. That's all. SEC only. This is not a game I think Florida's going to win. I like Florida plus 11.5 over Missouri. I don't think that they're going to win this game. Visitors lost the last 3 straight. But when you look at how this series looks, 11 points is usually something that's not covered. This is usually a 1-score game. Last year, Florida took care of business against Missouri, won by 7, 24-17. Year before that, Mizzou took them to overtime, won 24-23. Year before that, Florida blew them out. But when you look at these 2 teams right now, Florida's played pretty darn well the last couple of weeks.
They have.
Backdoor got covered Georgia, if I remember correctly. No, I guess not.
No,
Georgia
they
was a
did because
15 and a half. That's right.
yeah, you
And almost backdoor covered. Let's put it
I
that way.
challenged you on that one. No, you challenged me on it and you beat me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Arkansas was a really good game. LSU, they were actually in with it.
Yes,
They were in it with LSU toward the end. Mizzou's not like LSU. Mizzou's going to run the football at you.
Yeah.
And Brady Cook is electric getting outside the pocket. We saw that this week. Cody Schrader looks like he's a draft pick right now. Austin Eckler-ish is what I see when I watch him. Mizzou, I think that Mizzou wins. I just think that this is going to be a much closer game than the odds makers are calling for it to be. I think Mizzou's a great team. Obviously, they took care of my Vols this week. But this is typically a game. It's in the last 6 meetings have gone under, and it's typically close.
Yeah. Right when I saw this game with this line, this is one of those I'm staying away from it. I have no idea what's going to like. We think Mizzou's going to win. Spread wise, I have no idea. Mizzou could win by 25. They could win by 10. Like there's so many unknowns here. I do think their receivers will give Florida's D-backs a lot of problems. But if Florida shows up and runs the ball like they did in Tennessee a while ago, they're going to be in any game. So they can, cover that spread. This Mizzou team is for real. They're probably going to end the season with, a 10-2 record, it looks like. Who do they play? They have Arkansas the last game of the year. Is that right?
Yep. They got Arkansas. That's a trophy game for them.
Yeah. So they got. Oh, that's right. It's the outline of the two states. It's like yeah. Or no, that's Arkansas, Louisiana. I'm thinking of. But yeah, it is.
No. It is.
Okay.
It's the two states. Yep.
But
state line trophy.
Yeah, this Mizzou team is doing a lot of things right. They're not making mistakes. That Florida team is making mistakes, especially on defense. Florida makes a lot of mistakes, and Mizzou's good enough to capitalize on that. But for me, the spread is just untouchable. Like, I don't know. So I'm leaving it alone.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Round 5, final round here. You like Arkansas State over your darling Texas State plus 3.5.
Very few randos out there will have watched as much Texas State football as I have because of our 50-teamer fantasy league. I'm in the semifinals this week, by the way. So I keep
Congrats.
rolling. Thank you. And I like Texas State. I've invested in them heavily. I don't like them to win this one. This Arkansas State team is trending at the right time. They're doing a lot of things. They lost to South Alabama in a one-possession game, but before that, beat Louisiana, beat ULM. They had started off just terrible this year. Lost to Oklahoma by 70, lost to Memphis by like 40. They beat an FCS team, and then a few teams that weren't that good. But then they found Jalen Rayner, who has really come alive at QB. You can tell he's young. He's thrown some interceptions, but he's thrown way more touchdowns, and he's running the ball really well. And they have a few running backs who are also, doing a good job with that. Jarquez Cross, Zach Wallace, both running it well, have multiple touchdowns. Rayner isn't their leading rusher yards-wise, but he does have the most rushing touchdowns. Butch Jones is really doing a good job the second half of this year. They're another team that's trending in the right direction. Conversely, this Texas State team has not looked good the last couple of weeks. They got it taken to them, last week against Coastal. TJ Finley looked like he was a mess. They looked good against Georgia Southern the week before. Troy spanked them. Louisiana Lafayette took it to them, and then they beat a not good UL Monroe team 21-20. This game's in Jonesboro, and I like Arkansas State as the home dogs, maybe to win this game outright, just because they're running the ball really well.
And the Bobcats, ironically, have won 3 straight against the Red Wolves, which is an interesting stat when you consider the last few years. So Butch Jones, while he's been there, he hasn't had Texas State's number. Texas State's number.
He is not. No.
I think that I'm going to agree with you here. I think this is the year it breaks. Arkansas State really starting to step up and make things happen. They're also, I think Arkansas State's fighting for bowl eligibility at this point. They win this game, they're bowl eligible, and they got Marshall on the road next week.
Correct, they do. So, they're about 2 blocks this way. That game will be played, and I will be there.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of motivation. There's a lot of the coach is sitting down saying, hey, we need to win this game so we're bowl eligible. We want to go play in a bowl game. This is the game. We got to do it. Otherwise, we're going to have to really work to get it against Marshall, who looked really good last week. Quarterback change, isn't that right?
Yes. Cole Pennington.
I know. Yep. Crazy, right?
Yep.
Crazy. Did that not remind you of Daddy up there?
Oh, sure did.
Ironic. So, you don't want to play that Marshall team right now, not when you don't have him figured out. You don't have enough tape to figure him out.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, this is the one that Arkansas State's got circled, so I agree. I think they could probably pull this one out.
Yep, I'm hoping so as well.
I went ahead with the Pac-12 to wrap us up here in the final round, final pick today. I like Washington and plus 2.5 over Oregon State. Now, I get why Oregon State's favored. Game's going to be in Oregon State. That's a huge plus for them. They've been really good at home this year. They've handled a lot of good. They took care of Utah by 2 touchdowns at home. UCLA, they won by almost 2 touchdowns at home. Stanford, they absolutely demolished last week. So I understand why they're favored in this game. They've also been really gritty. They've been able to run the ball extremely well. One thing that I think Washington is doing pretty well, if you don't have an explosive running back, they've been playing pretty good run defense. And what I mean by that is you really have to kind of go back to the Oregon game to find a game where the running back was just killing them all day. You can make a case and say Scatabo did it with Arizona State.
Yeah.
But that was more of a bulk load of carries that piled up over time. Stanford didn't run the ball as well against them. They got some quarterback run going. And USC threw the ball all over the place. So Utah doesn't have that explosive weapon either, and that's why they were able to pull that one out. Now, granted, you talked straight off the break about Washington and how they're sort of trending and the things that the committee looks at. I like the fact that Washington is 10-1 straight up in this series since 2012. The visitor is also 7-1 against the spread since 2015. So, 2 interesting stats to kind of go with that. But Washington, I've been ragging on him all year. I've been talking about Penix and the issues that he has on my other show, the Sick Podcast. I do think that they take care of business here. Oregon State's defense is going to have a lot of pressure put on them. They don't have the explosive offense. Washington's got a strong enough defensive line to get after them, make things happen. I like Washington to win this one outright.
This is an interesting one. Oregon State is running the ball really well lately. They're getting about 5.5 yards, 5.4 yards carry in conference play. And Washington's run D is not bad, nor is it too good. They're kind of in the middle. And they're, like I said, they're second order wins for Washington. I mean, they're not good. That's one of the metrics they're poor in. And this Oregon State team is going to make it a rock fight. I think they suppress possessions here. Mm-hmm. For the first time ever, I am double challenging this one and going.
Oh,
yep. I like the Beavs at home. I got to do something. They could end up getting their pants beat off. Penix could throw for 400 yards against anybody. Maybe it happens, but there's enough data points in this one for me to think I got a shot, and I got to go for it.
That's fair.
So I am siding with the Beavs in this one in a 10-pointer. I also think they're on top of just being at home. They're extremely motivated. I mean, you got the two best teams in the conference this year, Washington and Oregon, both potential playoff teams. Oregon State is, playing with their middle fingers up in the last year of the conference when they got nothing going forward. I mean, they're very motivated, I think, to do this, and that won't be lost on Jonathan Smith and their team. So that's where I'm at with this one.
Now, isn't it that the judge in this case just ruled in favor of Oregon State and Washington State as these two sole commanders, basically, of the Pac-12? So doesn't that mean that, in theory, the Pac-12 title game will be Oregon State and Washington State?
I actually didn't see anything about the judge's ruling. I feel like I missed out there. I wish I would have paid attention to it.
Yeah, no, I think I saw something about that where it was actually a Reddit joke too, where it was like, it was a new projection of the 23-24
nice.
Pac-12 conference titles, and it was like every single sport it was Washington State and Oregon State, and they just would switch the logos.
Oh, nice. And if Oregon State wins their last two games, they would then rematch Washington in the conference title game, most likely, because then them and Oregon would both have 2 losses, but State would have the tiebreaker over them.
Fantastic. So the Civil War this year could have huge implications, but we got to get through this game first.
Yes.
Bunch of challenges this week. We got 4 challenges. We got you challenging me Louisville -1.5 over Miami of Florida, and a double challenge Washington +2.5 over Oregon State. Whereas I've challenged you on North Carolina +6.5 over Clemson, and Texas Tech -3 over UCF. So 25 points on the line. Again, excuse me. Again, the score. There's the score updated. Mike, you're at 70. I'm at 95. So 25 points on the line. You could, in theory, tie it and go into this week with a clean slate.
God, that'd be wild. I don't anticipate having that good of a week, but we can hope.
So we didn't talk about Heisman last week, but I think we have a lot to talk about with the Heisman race this week, don't we?
We probably do, yeah. Bo Nix is looking good right now. He is, according to a lot of books, he's jumped to the favorite right now. I still think McCarthy is going to have a chance if Michigan goes undefeated, beats Ohio State. Penix obviously is still in it if they go undefeated. The interesting one for me now is Jaden Daniels, because you see a lot of SEC people, he deserves it. He's the best player. So maybe he is. I don't see a guy winning who has 3 regular season losses. So I don't think he wins it, but it does bring up, he's certainly involved with it. He will have to absolutely dominate the Southeastern voting block to win the award, which Jordan Travis could hurt him there, so long as Florida State stays undefeated. But yeah, right now, if I was voting on it right now, I probably would be one of the people that would lean Penix. But at the end of the season, if I was voting for a projection, it would be Nix or McCarthy, I think.
So you don't think McCarthy got hurt with the 8 passing attempt performance that he had against Penn State this week?
Not if they beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten title and go undefeated. I think that will be overlooked a little.
So the interesting thing is I've been doing some work on Jaden Daniels. I think he, from an NFL draft standpoint, he's probably one of the biggest risers we've had this year.
Okay.
People were talking about him being a legitimate quarterback. I saw all the advanced scout stuff in the NFL, and they were all projecting him, top 100. I didn't see it at the time. Now we're having that conversation about him being a first-round pick. And when you look at his skill set, when you look at his body of work and all the different things he's done, there's only one player that you can really compare him to that's in the NFL right now.
Is that like from a college stat perspective or like an attribute perspective?
Attributes, skill set, what he's capable of doing. It's Lamar Jackson.
Okay.
Now, Lamar won the Heisman Trophy, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Louisville lost 3 games that
They had
year that he
three.
won it.
They were 9-3 in the regular season. Yes.
So isn't that interesting that we have an explosive running quarterback who became the first player in NCAA history last week to throw for 300 yards and run for 200 in the same game with 3 losses,
Yeah.
sitting there in that position? I think that Jaden Daniels might actually get a lot more consideration, not just from the Southeastern block of the Heisman, just because the stats that he's been putting up this week, especially toward the end of the year, or the season, especially toward the end of the year, have been very impressive.
They have been good. Yeah. I do think there's like the Lamar that you brought up a good point with, they also had 3 losses. I've had a lot of people ask me that this week or, pose it on X. I think somewhat different in the sense that pretty much everybody knew Lamar was the guy. There wasn't another standout candidate. Daniels has a few of those other standout candidates that he's up against. Now, Nix is one. Penix could be one. Daniels has hung around longer than I thought, though, and it's an attribute to him that even with those losses, he's still in this discussion. I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, so the Alabama game, those who they played 2 weeks ago, right?
Yes.
I gotta double check.
No, you're right. It was.
So the
42-28 one. Yeah.
Right. So the Alabama game, he became the first quarterback in LSU history to run for 150 yards and pass for 225 or something like that.
Okay.
And follows it up the next week going for 300 and 200. I mean,
I know last week was the most passing yards the Gators had ever allowed.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I mean, he was torching them. I mean, Neighbors is incredible. Brian Thomas is incredible. I mean, we're talking about another loaded LSU offensive draft picks. And it's a tragedy that they lost 3 games.
And granted, their 3 losses are all the legit teams. I'm not saying they've lost any games.
Yeah, every single one of them are top. Well, we're top 10. Ole Miss dropped to 13 this
13.
week.
Yep.
So, but all the teams they've lost to have been top 10 teams this season. And they still have Georgia. They just got Georgia State and Texas A&M to face. A Texas A&M team without their head coach, and a Georgia State team that's been on the downward spiral here.
Yeah.
Won't be playing for an SEC title, but I do have to wonder if he's going to be able to garner enough support, just with some of the craziness that he's put up this year.
You also wonder he's a guy who's going to be in that decision-making process, like Caleb Williams. Do they play in the bowl game? I don't know that he does. Caleb Williams, I don't think does. Daniels will be a coin flip, I think.
And the other interesting thing to bring up about Williams is he could go to the Senior Bowl if he wanted to.
Yes.
New role this year.
Yeah.
Should be very interesting.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. I'm expecting to see Daniels down there. I think that. Yeah. I think he'll be there. Absolutely.
Think Nix will be there?
Yes. Yeah, I would say Nix. Nix will be there. Daniels will be there. Michael Pratt's already committed. He's already going. So that should squash out any ideas of him going into the transfer portal, potentially going to another team. He's going to draft.
Okay.
Beyond that, I think that Austin Reed at Western Kentucky's got a really good shot.
Good. Maybe that would be nice to see him there. I did see Quinn Ewers is going to go back to Texas next year.
He is. Ewers is. Shader Sanders is going to as well.
Yeah.
I think Plumlee's got a really good shot at UCF. That's one of the guys.
Going to the Senior Bowl?
Yes.
Good.
That's one of the players that I've seen the Senior Bowl talk a lot about throughout the year. They said, and he has made some jumps as a passer this year. And then I don't know who that last one's going to be. It could be a good number of guys. It very well maybe Penix. So
yeah, that would make sense.
But we will see. Sam Hartman is probably in that conversation as well. It just depends. See how it goes.
I'll be curious. this is a guy who could come back to college next year, but we don't know. You're talking about Oregon State, what DJU ends up doing, because he's played way better than most people thought this year. And I think for him, another year of college would probably serve him well, but you never know.
Yeah. Well, you got anything else to throw in here, Hoos? Or are we done?
No, I think we've said everything.
Fantastic. 25 points on the line. 25 points is the spread between myself and Mike going into this week. Thanks for tuning in to Gridiron Eve here on our wonderful Twitter accounts and YouTube. Back at it next week. Let's see what that looks like. Hopefully, for Hoos' sake, it doesn't look like this.
Yep, I hope so.
That would be tragic, I think is the word we're looking for.
That would be helpful, yeah.
Follow him on X at HughesmanCFB. Follow me at DraftVogel. Follow the show at Gridiron Eve. Back at it next week. We'll see you guys